The rain fell softly on the city street, blurring the lights of passing cars into long, trembling streaks. Ethan Cole sat behind the wheel of his black sedan, fingers tight around the steering wheel, eyes fixed forward. He was a man who had everything: money, status, a towering glass office downtown. Yet tonight, his chest felt strangely hollow. At the corner ahead, a woman sat on the wet pavement, thin coat clinging to her frame, cardboard signs shaking in her hands. Ethan barely slowed. He'd seen hundreds like her. The light turned green. He pressed the gas until a small voice in the back seat whispered, trembling, "Dad, wait." Before the story pulls you any further into this night, let me ask you something simple. Where are you listening from right now? What city? What corner of the world? It still amazes me how one quiet story can travel across oceans and streets. Share your place below, and let this moment connect us all. Ethan sighed, irritation flashing across his face. "Leo, we're late," he said, checking his watch. His son didn't answer. Instead, Leo unbuckled his seatbelt and leaned forward, eyes locked on the woman outside. The rain tapped harder against the windshield, filling the silence. "Dad," Leo said again, his voice softer now, almost scared. She looks cold." Ethan glanced at the rear-view mirror. Leo's eyes were wide, reflecting the streetlight glow, the kind of look that made adults uncomfortable, the look that saw too much. "We can't stop for everyone," Ethan replied. "That's not how the world works." Outside, the woman lowered her head, shielding her face from the rain. A strand of dark hair fell loose, plastered to her cheek. For a brief second, Ethan felt something tug at him, an old memory knocking from somewhere deep. He shook it off. The past had no place in his clean, ordered life. The car rolled forward slowly, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Leo pressed his palm to the window. "Dad, please." Ethan hesitated. Cars honked behind him. He cursed under his breath and pulled to the curb. "5 minutes," he muttered. "Stay in the car." He stepped out, the cold rain seeping instantly through his coat. Up close, the woman looked worse. Thin, exhausted, eyes hollow from long nights without sleep. Her sign read in uneven letters, "Just need food." Ethan reached into his wallet, pulled out a bill without looking, and held it out. "Here," he said quickly. "Take care." The woman looked up. Her eyes met his, and something cracked. They were familiar. Too familiar. Dark, tired, but once warm. She didn't take the money right away. Her lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. From the car, Leo climbed out, ignoring his father's sharp glance. He walked closer, rain soaking his sneakers. "Mom," he whispered, barely louder than the rain. The word hit Ethan like a blow to the chest. "Leo," he snapped, "don't say things like that." But Leo wasn't looking at him. He was staring at the woman, tears mixing with rain on his cheeks. "Dad," he said, voice breaking. "That's Mom." Ethan laughed once, short and hollow. "That's impossible." His wife, Grace, had disappeared years ago. Vanished after endless fights, after nights of silence. He told himself she'd chosen another life. A weaker life. The woman's knees trembled. She reached out, then pulled her hand back, shame flooding her face. "Leo," she said softly, like the name might shatter if spoken too loud. The city seemed to fade. Ethan's breath caught. Memories rushed in, Grace's laughter in their small first apartment, the way she hummed while cooking, the night she left with tears in her eyes and a bag that wasn't even full. He took a step back. "No," he whispered. "You're dead." Grace swallowed hard. "I try to come back," she said. "I tried so many times." The rain fell harder, soaking them all as the truth pressed down, heavy and unavoidable. And in that moment, as Ethan stood between the life he built and the life he abandoned, the world waited, holding its breath, while the past finally reached out its hand. Ethan's hands shook as the rain soaked through his sleeves. The word dead still hung between them, ugly and sharp. Grace flinched, as if he'd struck her. Leo stepped closer to her instinctively, his small body forming a fragile shield. "I'm not," Grace said quietly. I just stopped being visible to you. Ethan felt anger surge, hot, defensive. You left, he snapped. You walked out on us. On him. He pointed toward Leo, who tightened his grip on Grace's coat. Don't stand there and pretend. I didn't leave him, Grace interrupted, her voice cracking for the first time. I left you. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. And I paid for that every single day. A car sped past, splashing water onto the curb. None of them moved. Leo looked up at Grace, searching her face like a puzzle he was afraid to finish. Mom, where did you go? He asked. Grace knelt despite the cold pavement, ignoring the pain in her knees. I got sick, sweetheart, she said gently. Not the kind you see on the outside at first. I asked your dad for help. I begged. But he was already chasing something else. Ethan's jaw clenched. That's not fair. She gave a sad smile. Neither was being told I was a burden. The words sliced through him. Memories surfaced. Late nights at the office. Unanswered calls. Grace crying in the kitchen while he checked emails. He remembered saying things he never apologized for, because success had always felt more urgent than softness. Leo turned slowly toward Ethan. Dad, is that true? Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. The rain filled the silence again. He didn't know how to explain a decade of selfish choices to an 8-year-old who still believed adults were supposed to be right. Grace rose unsteadily. I don't want anything from you, she said. I never did. I just wanted to see my son once. I didn't expect it to be like this. Ethan looked at the thin coat, the shaking hands, the hollowed cheeks. Then why are you here? He demanded. On the street? Her eyes dropped. Because when you disappear long enough, she whispered, the world stops saving you a place. Leo's face crumpled. You can come home, he said quickly. We have a warm house. My room has 2 blankets. Dad can... Leo. Ethan cut in sharply. He felt panic now, real panic. Bringing Grace back meant reopening everything he'd locked away. It meant facing himself. You don't understand. Leo's voice trembled. Then explain it to me. That simple sentence hit harder than any accusation. Ethan stared at his son, the same eyes he saw in the mirror every morning, now filled with disappointment. For the first time, the success he wore like armor felt thin. If you were standing there in Ethan's place, what choice would you make? Would you protect the life you built, or the people you once promised never to abandon? Share your honest answer below. And if this moment stirred something you can't quite put into words, tap like to show that compassion still has a voice. Ethan exhaled slowly. Get in a car, he said at last. Grace looked up, startled. I don't want to cause trouble. You won't, Leo said quickly, grabbing her hand. I'll sit in the middle. The drive was silent except for the rhythmic sweep of the wipers. Grace stared out the window, watching the city she once called home pass by like a stranger. Ethan's mind raced. He told himself this was temporary. Just food. A hotel. Closure. But when they reached the house, large, bright, untouched by real struggle, Grace froze at the doorway. The warmth hit her like a memory she wasn't sure she deserved. Leo pulled her inside, chattering nervously about his school, his favorite cereal, the dog he wished they had. Ethan stood back, watching the two of them together. Grace smiled through tears as Leo talked, that same smile Ethan had fallen in love with years ago. Guilt crept in, slow and heavy. Later, as Grace sat at the kitchen table wrapped in a blanket, Ethan placed a bowl of soup in front of her. Their fingers brushed accidentally. She flinched. I never stopped loving him, she said softly, not looking up. I just stopped believing I mattered. Ethan swallowed. Outside, the rain finally eased, but inside, the storm was only beginning. The house felt too quiet once Leo finally fell asleep on the couch, his head resting against Grace's arm like it had always belonged there. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching the tension between the two adults who no longer knew how to speak to each other. Ethan cleared his throat. You can take the guest room, he said. For tonight. Grace nodded. Thank you. Her voice carried no expectation, only exhaustion. As she stood, The blanket slipped from her shoulders, revealing bruises along her wrist. Old, yellowing marks of a life lived on hard edges. Ethan noticed them and looked away too late. Shame burned in his chest. In the guest room, Grace sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded tightly in her lap. Ethan hovered near the door, unsure whether to leave or stay. Finally, he spoke. "You said you got sick." Grace let out a slow breath. "Depression," she said simply. "After Leo was born, it swallowed me whole. I told you I couldn't breathe anymore. You told me to be stronger." She looked up at him then. "I tried." Ethan's mind replayed old scenes, Grace sitting alone in the dark, unanswered texts piling up, his irritation at her silence. He'd convinced himself she was dramatic. Weak. Anything but hurting. "What happened after you left?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Grace's gaze drifted to the window. "I stayed with a friend at first. Then the money ran out. I worked where I could, cafes, cleaning jobs. When the panic attacks came, I couldn't hold anything steady." She paused. "When you don't have an address, people stop trusting you. When they stop trusting you, you stop trusting yourself." Ethan leaned against the wall, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He'd built his empire on control and certainty, never once imagining the chaos of not knowing where you'd sleep. "Why didn't you tell me about Leo?" he asked. "You could have called." Grace's lips trembled. "I did. For months. Your assistant stopped putting my calls through. Then you changed your number." She looked at him with quiet finality. "You erased me." Silence settled between them again, thick and suffocating. Down the hall, Leo stirred in his sleep, murmuring softly. Grace's eyes softened at the sound. "Every birthday," she whispered. "I wondered how tall he was getting, whether he liked dinosaurs like you did, whether he still laughed with his whole body." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I told myself he was better without me. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Or wish they had? Write yes if you have, and share their name if you feel ready. Sometimes gratitude deserves to be spoken out loud." Ethan closed his eyes. He remembered Leo's kindergarten play, scanning the crowd for a woman who never came. He'd told himself Grace didn't care enough. Now the truth rewrote everything. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the kitchen, warm and almost hopeful. Leo woke early, dragging Grace with him as he showed her his drawings, his toy cars, the height chart on the wall where Ethan marked his growth every year. "You missed this one," Leo said, pointing to a line. "Dad says I grew 2 inches that summer." Grace smiled sadly. "I can see it in your eyes," she said, brushing his hair back. Ethan watched from the doorway, coffee growing cold in his hand. Something inside him shifted, not dramatically, but undeniably. This wasn't a stranger in his home. This was the woman who knew his son's laughter before he did. Later, Ethan offered to drive Grace to a clinic. "Just to check your health," he said, keeping his tone practical. No strings. Grace hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." At the clinic, as Grace filled out forms, Ethan sat beside Leo in the waiting area. "Are you mad at me?" Leo asked suddenly. Ethan looked down at his son. "Why would I be?" Leo shrugged. "Mom said you were busy a lot. Maybe too busy to see her." The honesty of children had a way of cutting through every excuse. Ethan swallowed. "I made mistakes," he said. "Big ones." Leo thought for a moment. "Can you fix them?" Ethan didn't answer right away. Through the glass, he saw Grace talking to the nurse, shoulders tense but hopeful. Fixing things suddenly felt less like an option and more like a responsibility. As they left the clinic, Grace winced slightly with each step. Ethan noticed and instinctively offered his arm. She hesitated, then accepted. The simple contact sent a quiet shock through both of them. That night, after Leo went to bed, Grace stood in the living room, twisting her fingers. "I can't stay long," she said. "I don't want to confuse him." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, not as a problem to manage, but as a person he'd broken. "Maybe he's already been confused long enough," he replied. Grace met his gaze, hope and fear colliding in her eyes. Outside, the city hummed. unaware that inside this house, a family hovered on the edge of something fragile, something that could still shatter, or finally begin to heal. Grace didn't sleep much that night. She lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling as memories rose and fell like quiet waves. Every sound from the hallway made her heart tighten. Footsteps, a door creak, Leo turning in his sleep. Being this close to the life she once lost felt almost cruel, like touching warmth after years of cold. In the early morning, Ethan was already up. He stood in the kitchen, staring at his phone, unread emails piling up. For the first time in years, none of them felt urgent. When Grace appeared in the doorway, he startled slightly. "Coffee?" he asked. She nodded. They stood side by side in silence as the machine hummed. It felt strangely familiar, like an echo from another lifetime. "I spoke to the doctor," Grace said quietly. "They want me to start treatment again. Therapy, medication." She hesitated. "I don't have insurance." Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'll take care of it." Grace turned to him, startled. "Ethan, I don't want." "It's not charity," he interrupted, then softened his tone. "It's responsibility." She searched his face, trying to read whether this was guilt or something deeper. "You don't owe me," she said. "I owe Leo," he replied. "And I owe the truth." Later that day, Ethan took Leo to school while Grace stayed behind, folding the blanket she'd slept with. The house no longer felt like a stranger's place. It felt like borrowed time. She knew this couldn't last forever. At school pickup, Leo ran out grinning. "Mom, Dad." The words slipped out so easily that both adults froze. Leo noticed immediately. "I mean, is that okay?" Grace knelt, smiling through tears. "That's more than okay." On the walk home, Leo skipped ahead, kicking at leaves. "Can we all have dinner together tonight?" he asked casually, like he wasn't asking for a miracle. Ethan glanced at Grace. She nodded. "I'd like that," she said. That evening, Grace cooked for the first time in years. The meal was simple, pasta, garlic bread, but the smell filled the house with something warmer than food. Leo set the table proudly. Ethan watched, his chest tight with a feeling he didn't quite recognize. As they ate, Leo talked nonstop about school, about a classmate who got bullied, about a teacher who always smiled even when kids were loud. Grace listened like every word mattered. Ethan realized how much Leo had needed that kind of attention. After dinner, Leo ran off to do homework. Grace and Ethan remained at the table, the plates cleared but the weight still there. "I'm not asking to come back," Grace said suddenly. "Not like before. I just want to be part of his life. Whatever that looks like." Ethan leaned back, rubbing his temples. "I don't know how to do this halfway." "Neither do I," she admitted. "But we can learn." Now it's your turn to pause for a moment. Share one small good thing you did recently, something kind, something human. Write it below so others remember that goodness still exists. Your simple act might be exactly what someone else needs tonight. The days that followed were awkward but steady. Grace attended appointments. Ethan adjusted his schedule, leaving work earlier, showing up more. Leo noticed everything. Children always did. One afternoon, Ethan came home early and found Grace helping Leo with homework at the dining table. Leo laughed, pencil tucked behind his ear. The sight hit Ethan hard. This was what he'd missed, not because he couldn't have it, but because he'd chosen not to see it. Later, Ethan stood alone in his office, staring at a framed photo of himself receiving an award. Applause frozen in time. For the first time, it looked small. That night, he made a decision. At dinner, he cleared his throat. "Grace, I want you to stay. Not as a guest. As Leo's mother." Grace froze. "Ethan, I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said quickly. "I'm asking you to let me try to do better. Even if it takes years." Leo looked between them, holding his breath. Grace's eyes filled. "I'm scared," she whispered, "of hoping again." "So am I," Ethan admitted. "But I'm more scared of losing this again." Silence stretched. Then Grace reached for Leo's hand. "I'll stay," she said softly. "For him." Leo's smile lit up the room. But even as warmth settled over the table, something unseen loomed ahead. Healing had begun, but forgiveness was still unspoken, and the past was not done demanding its reckoning. The first real crack appeared quietly. It was a Tuesday evening, ordinary in every way. Leo was asleep, the house dim except for the soft lamp in the living room. Grace sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, flipping through an old photo album Leo had found earlier that day. Pictures from a life she'd only seen from a distance. School plays, birthdays, vacations she hadn't known about. Ethan watched her from the doorway. She lingered on one photo longer than the rest. Leo, age 5, missing his 2 front teeth, standing between Ethan and a woman Grace had never seen. The woman's arm was wrapped around Ethan's waist. Grace's fingers trembled. "Who's that?" she asked quietly, though something in her already knew. Ethan's stomach dropped. He'd forgotten the album existed. "That's Ava," he said after a moment. "She worked with me. We were together for a while." "How long is a while?" Grace asked, still staring at the picture. Ethan hesitated. 3 years. Grace closed the album slowly. The room felt colder. "So while I was sleeping in shelters," she said carefully, "while I was skipping meals so I wouldn't faint, you were building another life." Ethan stepped forward. It wasn't like that. She finally looked at him. Her eyes weren't angry. They were devastated. It was exactly like that. Silence crashed between them, heavier than any argument. Grace stood, her legs unsteady. "I need some air." She grabbed her coat and walked out into the night before Ethan could stop her. The street was quiet, the same kind of quiet that had once swallowed her whole. Grace walked without direction, the past and present colliding inside her chest. She told herself she shouldn't be surprised. Ethan had moved on. The world always did. Behind her, footsteps approached. "Grace," Ethan called, breathless. "Please." She stopped but didn't turn around. "I knew you'd changed," she said. "I just didn't realize how replaceable I'd been." "You weren't," he said quickly. "I was angry, hurt. I thought you chose to disappear. Ava was distraction. That's all." Grace laughed softly, bitter. "Distractions don't last 3 years." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "I'm not proud of it," he said, "but none of it meant what this does." He gestured between them. "What Leo means. What you." She turned then, tears spilling freely. "You don't get to rewrite history now that it hurts to remember." Her words landed exactly where they were meant to. Ethan's shoulders sagged. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't." They stood there under the streetlight, 2 people facing the truth without armor. Grace hugged herself, shivering, not from the cold, but from the old fear creeping back in. The fear that hope was just another way to get hurt. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she whispered. Ethan nodded slowly. "I know." At home, Leo stirred in his sleep, calling out softly. Grace closed her eyes at the sound. Her chest ached. When they returned, neither spoke. Grace went to the guest room, closing the door gently. Ethan remained in the living room long after the lights were off, staring into the dark. The next morning, Grace didn't come down for breakfast. Ethan knocked once, then again. "Grace." No answer. Panic flared. He opened the door. She was sitting on the bed, fully dressed, a small bag at her feet. "I think I should leave," she said calmly. Too calmly. Ethan's heart pounded. "Because of Ava?" "Because of everything," Grace replied. "I came back thinking I could step into the life you built. I forgot that life was built without me." Leo appeared behind Ethan, rubbing his eyes. "Mom?" Grace's composure shattered instantly. She knelt and pulled him into her arms, holding him like she might fall apart if she let go. "I love you so much," she whispered into his hair. Leo pulled back, confused. "Are you going somewhere?" Grace looked at Ethan. Her eyes begged him to say something, anything honest enough to matter. Ethan swallowed hard. "She's not leaving," he said, surprising even himself. "We're figuring things out." Grace searched his face. "Ethan, I ended it years ago," he continued. "With Ava. And if there's anything left that still hurts you, I won't hide from it. I won't minimize it. I won't rush you. The room was silent except for Leo's breathing. Grace's lips trembled. Why now? Because I finally understand the cost of pretending I was the victim, Ethan said. And I don't want Leo to grow up thinking love disappears when things get hard. Tears streamed down Grace's face. She pressed her forehead to Leo's. I don't want to disappear anymore. If this moment hit you right in the chest, if it stirred something deep and tender, leave a red heart. Sometimes one small symbol says what words simply can't. Grace stayed. Not because everything was fixed, but because, for the first time, the truth was no longer running away. And that truth would soon demand something even harder than honesty. The real test didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, wrapped in paperwork and whispered phone calls. Ethan received the call on a Thursday afternoon. He stepped into his office, glass walls revealing the city below, and listened as his lawyer spoke in careful, measured tones. There's a complication, the lawyer said. Ava is filing a claim. She believes she has parental rights over Leo. The words didn't make sense at first. That's impossible, Ethan said. Leo isn't her son. She helped raise him for several years, the lawyer replied. She's arguing emotional dependency. It's not uncommon. Ethan felt the room tilt. After everything, after Grace had finally come back, this was happening. When he got home that night, Grace sensed it immediately. What's wrong? She asked, watching him loosen his tie with shaking hands. He hesitated. Then he told her everything. Grace sat down slowly, like her legs had given out beneath her. She wants to take him? She whispered. No, Ethan said quickly. Not take. Share custody. Visits. Influence. Grace laughed once, hollow. I disappear for years because I'm sick and poor, and now someone else wants credit for raising my child? Ethan reached for her hand. She pulled away, standing abruptly. I knew it, she said, pacing. I knew something would come and remind me that I don't really belong here. That's not true, Ethan said, following her. I'll fight this. You didn't fight for me, she shot back, the words escaping before she could stop them. They both froze. Grace covered her mouth, tears welling instantly. I'm sorry. I didn't. No, Ethan said quietly. You're right. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Meetings with lawyers. Documents spread across the dining table. Leo sensed the shift, his laughter quieter, his questions more frequent. Is Mom mad? He asked one night as Ethan tucked him in. Ethan swallowed. No, buddy. Grown-ups just have hard things to figure out sometimes. Leo frowned. Promise she won't go away again. The promise lodged in Ethan's throat like glass. I promise I'll do everything I can, he said finally. That night, Grace sat alone in the guest room, staring at the packed bag she still hadn't unpacked. Old instincts whispered to her, leave before you're pushed. It had always been safer to disappear than to be rejected. A soft knock came at the door. Ethan stepped inside slowly. I'm scared, he admitted, his voice stripped of pride. Not of losing a case. Of losing him. Of losing you because I waited too long to be brave. Grace looked at him, really looked at him. The man before her wasn't the polished executive who dismissed her pain years ago. He was smaller now. Human. I spent years forgiving you in my head, she said. But forgiveness in theory is easy. Living with the memories, that's harder. I know, Ethan said. And if you need to hate me for a while. I don't hate you, she interrupted softly. That's the problem. The custody hearing approached like a storm. Ava's name hung in the air, unspoken but ever-present. Grace barely slept. Ethan barely ate. The morning of the hearing, Grace stood in front of the mirror, hands trembling. What if they decide I'm unstable? She whispered. What if they say I'm not fit? Ethan stepped behind her, careful, hesitant. Then I'll tell them the truth, he said. That you're the strongest person I know. That you survived what I helped cause. She turned to face him, eyes shining. You'd say that under oath? Yes. Grace's breath caught. This was the man she'd needed back then, the one who stood beside her instead of above her. In the courthouse hallway, Leo sat between them, swinging his legs. He reached out and took both their hands, linking them together like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Whatever happens," he said seriously, "we're still a team, right?" Ethan squeezed his hand. Grace did the same, fighting tears. Before they were called in, Grace pulled Ethan aside. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Be honest with me. If the judge asks whether I should have full custody, what will you say?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked at Leo, at the boy who had unknowingly brought them back together. Then he looked at Grace. "I'll say the truth," he said. "That Leo needs you, and that I don't deserve him more than you do." Grace closed her eyes, tears slipping free. "Be honest with yourself for a moment. Could you forgive someone who left you broken if they finally stood up when it mattered most? Type forgive if you could, or never if that pain would be too heavy to carry." The courtroom doors opened, and as they stepped inside, Grace realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. No matter the outcome, her heart was fully in this fight now, and there would be no running away anymore. The courtroom felt colder than Grace expected. Wooden benches lined the room, polished to a dull shine, and the air carried the faint scent of old paper and something heavier, judgment, maybe. Grace sat upright, hands folded tightly in her lap, her knee bouncing despite her effort to stay still. Ethan sat beside her, shoulders squared, jaw set. Leo wasn't allowed inside. He waited outside with a court officer, clutching his backpack like a lifeline. When Ava entered, Grace recognized her immediately from the photo. She was composed, well-dressed, eyes steady. She didn't look like a villain. That almost made it worse. The judge listened patiently as lawyers spoke in careful phrases: emotional bonds, stability, best interest of the child. Grace's past was laid out like a report card of failures: homelessness, mental illness, gaps in custody. Each word felt like a quiet bruise. Then it was Ethan's turn to speak. He stood, hands resting lightly on the table. His voice didn't shake, but it wasn't the voice he used in boardrooms either. "I failed my wife when she needed me," he said plainly. "I chose work over compassion. And when she disappeared, I told myself it was easier to believe she didn't care than to admit I had pushed her away." Grace's breath caught. "I don't deny that another woman was present in my son's life for a time," Ethan continued. "But presence is not the same as origin. Grace is Leo's mother. She is his safety. And if there's any stability in his life now, it's because she came back when she had every reason not to." The room was silent. When Grace was called, she stood slowly, legs trembling. She spoke honestly, not perfectly. She didn't deny her struggles. She named them. "I wasn't strong enough back then," she said. "But I'm stronger now. And I'm still learning. All I want is the chance to keep choosing my son, every single day." The judge leaned back, thoughtful. After what felt like an eternity, the decision came. Ava's claim was denied. Grace felt the words before she fully understood them. Denied. No shared custody. No legal claim. Her knees nearly buckled as relief rushed through her. Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. When they stepped outside, Leo ran straight into Grace's arms. "We're okay," Ethan said softly, watching them. "You did it." Grace shook her head, tears streaming. "We did." In the weeks that followed, something shifted. Not magically, not perfectly, but steadily. Grace moved into the house fully this time. The guest room became hers. Then slowly, naturally, she and Ethan began sharing space again. Not rushing, just being present. They attended therapy together. Some sessions were quiet. Others were brutal. Grace spoke about nights she cried alone. Ethan listened without interrupting, without defending. One evening, after a particularly hard session, they sat on the front steps as dusk settled around them. "I used to think redemption was loud," Ethan said. "Big gestures. Grand apologies." Grace smiled faintly. "Turns out it's mostly showing up when it's uncomfortable." He nodded. "I'm sorry it took me this long." She looked at him. "I'm still here." Leo thrived. His laughter returned, fuller now. He started drawing pictures of the three of them again, crayon figures holding hands under suns that smiled too brightly to be real. One night, as Grace tucked him in, Leo asked quietly, "Mom, are you happy?" Grace paused. "I'm healing," she said honestly. "And that feels close to happy." He nodded, satisfied. "I like when you're here when I wake up." Down the hall, Ethan listened, chest tight. He realized then that happiness wasn't something you earned after success. It was something you protected through humility. Months later, on a rainy evening not unlike the one where it all began, the three of them walked past the same street corner. A man sat there now, holding a cardboard sign. Leo slowed. Ethan didn't hesitate. He stopped, reached into his pocket, and knelt, not just to give money, but to meet the man's eyes. Grace watched, her heart full in a way it hadn't been in years. If you believe love still finds a way back, even after it's been lost, comment him. Let this space fill with hope tonight. Someone scrolling right now might need to see it. As they walked on, Grace slipped her hand into Ethan's. This time he didn't let go. The past no longer stood between them. It stood behind them, quiet, finally. And ahead, there was something gentle waiting. The rain that evening felt different, lighter somehow, as if the sky itself had softened. Grace stood at the kitchen window, watching droplets slide down the glass while Leo worked on a puzzle at the table. Ethan moved quietly behind her, setting down 2 mugs of tea. "For you," he said. She accepted it with a small smile. Moments like this still surprised her. The calm, the ordinary peace. For years, her life had been about survival. Now it was about staying. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked softly. "On the street?" Ethan nodded. "Every day." He leaned against the counter. "I think about how close I was to driving past my whole life." Grace turned to him. "You didn't," she said. "That matters." He met her gaze. "Because of Leo." "Because of you," she corrected gently. "Because somewhere in you there was still room to stop." Leo looked up from his puzzle. "Stop what?" Grace smiled and walked over, kissing the top of his head. "From missing what's important." Leo thought about that, then nodded like it made perfect sense. Later that night, after Leo fell asleep, Ethan and Grace sat on the couch, the room lit only by a small lamp. The silence between them was no longer tense, it was shared. "I need to say something," Ethan began, his voice careful. "Not as an apology, not as a promise." He took a breath. "But as the truth." Grace waited. "I used to think providing money was the same as providing love," he said. "I thought if I built enough, earned enough, protected enough, I could avoid being present. I was wrong." Grace's eyes filled, but she didn't interrupt. "I can't undo what I did to you," Ethan continued, "or the years you lost. But I can choose who I am now. Every day." He looked at her, raw and open. "And I want to choose you, if you'll let me." Grace closed her eyes, tears slipping free. She had imagined this moment in darker places, when hope felt foolish. Now that it was here, it felt almost fragile. "I'm not the same woman I was," she said quietly. "I'm still learning how to trust my own ground." "I know," Ethan replied. "We can learn together." Slowly. Grace reached for his hand. This time, there was no hesitation. "Okay," she said. Slowly. Outside, the rain stopped. Weeks passed. Then months. Life didn't turn into a perfect story, but it became a real one. There were arguments. Therapy sessions that left them drained. Days when Grace's anxiety returned uninvited, and nights when Ethan caught himself retreating into old habits. But now they noticed. And they came back. One afternoon, Grace volunteered at a local shelter. Ethan joined her, sleeves rolled up, listening more than he spoke. Leo handed out sandwiches, proud and serious. A woman sitting on a bench looked up at Grace and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." Grace felt something settle in her chest. Purpose. Not born from pain, but shaped by it. That night, as they walked home, Leo skipped ahead, humming. "Mom," he called. "Dad." "Yes," they answered together. "I'm glad you found each other again." Grace and Ethan exchanged a look, one filled with gratitude and quiet awe. "So are we," Grace said. They stopped at the corner near their home. The city lights flickered on, illuminating faces rushing past, each carrying their own unseen stories. Grace leaned into Ethan's side, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. "This doesn't erase what happened," she said. "No," he agreed. "But it changes what happens next." Before this story closes, pause with me for a moment. If what Grace carried, her pain, her patience, her courage, touched you in any way, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for this story, but for every soul who suffered in silence and still chose kindness. One small click can be your way of saying, "I see you. You mattered." That night, Grace stood by Leo's bed, watching him sleep. His chest rose and fell steadily, safe, whole. She turned off the light and closed the door softly. In the hallway, Ethan waited. "Everything okay?" he asked. Grace smiled, a real one, warm and unguarded. "Yes," she said. "For the first time in a long time, yes." They stood there together, not as a perfect family, but as a healing one. And somewhere in the quiet space between past mistakes and future hope, a simple truth remained. No one is ever truly lost until we stop looking back.